I'm Mike Andrewes of Yastis. I'm here with Karina Klever of Clever Compliance. Hey, Karina. Hey, everyone. Today's topic is how to start your cyber GRC program. So some of you I know are on the call are much more advanced than that, have many years of experience. So we'll try to make this relevant to both beginners, people just curious to see what's going on, as well as some of the experts that are here with us. So cyber GRC, what is that? Is it the same as cybersecurity? Well, let's get into it. So the G for governance, that is related to taking into account the laws, regulations, guidelines, and contractual requirements that apply to you, then putting a framework in place that allows you to be compliant with them. And that includes assigning roles, policies, procedures, and security controls, both administrative, technical, and physical. And then moving on to the R, that's risk management, which is the continuous process of identifying the risk and dealing with them, ideally mitigating them, but you could also transfer them. And then compliance, which is the C, is related to just making sure everything's going right. So you do that through user training, ongoing audit, automated checks for compliance, or it could be just log reviews and things of that nature. And that's how it kind of all comes together. So you might be thinking, why do I care about this? Well, in cybersecurity, you always want to tie it to the supporting the business, right? And why do businesses care about this sort of thing? Well, it usually comes down to making money by gaining a competitive advantage so you can win larger deals, or losing less money by avoiding fines, penalties, and lawsuits, or saving time, right? Because you have a lot of priorities and cybersecurity might not be the top one. So you want to do this as efficiently as possible. So that's the background to this. And now I want to hand it over to Karina to give a little background about herself and her company, as well as to give us a relevant example of cyber GRC in the real world that the audience might be able to relate to.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to keep it really short. I've been in IT for 35 years now, GRC specifically since 2002, and have worked in all kinds of different company sizes, maturity levels, industries, regulations, frameworks, the whole thing. So definitely bring a lot to the table. And we just kind of wanted to get together to highlight some of those really critical things that you want to kind of think about as you're creating your 2025 plan for your corporate level compliance, right? And of course, a little bit about personal compliance again. So a recent example, you know what, there's a lot, right? There are a lot of examples out there right now that are happening. I think the one that I'm going to hone in on, and not that I'm biased to healthcare, it's just I want to share some very easily accessible information with the audience here. So I'm going to basically bring up HHS's listing, and I kind of want to quantify this really, really quickly. This is publicly available for everyone, and I'm more than happy to get you the link. It's ocrportal.hhs.gov. It lists all open cases, right? Open cases currently under investigation for the last 2 years that have been reported. So what is the guideline here? The guideline says if you have to abide by HIPAA, so you're an insurance company, you're a healthcare provider, you're a hospital, if you have to abide by HIPAA and you've lost information about 500 or more individuals, you have to report it to the HHS. And that's what this list is. And as you scroll down, you can really see, look, this is yesterday. This one notification was from yesterday. We're not too far into the month, but on the 1st, it looks like we had a lot of just a few weeks ago, we had a lot of individuals affected. There is a little green icon there that says export as Excel. Everyone is available for this information. I do work with this data on a regular basis. Right now, I went and I pulled the report for just this morning And I'm going to go ahead and share that really quickly. So the report is right here, this one. So I pulled this just this morning, and of course, a lot of us know about Change Healthcare, right? 100 million individuals affected. I sorted this data by number of individuals affected. When you tally this up at the bottom, 257 million. Folks,
Wow.
there's 354 million individuals in all of America. This is 75% of all of Americans have actually been breached by this. And as you can see, some of these numbers, yes, they only put down 500 just to make the initial notification, but a lot of these do fluctuate upwards with time. The other thing I wanted to kind of highlight is the majority of these do say that there is a hacking or an IT incident, and actually not just the majority, over 85% of when you pull this list at any given moment will usually say a hacking or an IT incident against many times a network server. So folks, I want to caution right now, just with these two columns, vendor management, and we are going to be talking about this as one of the critical things and areas you really want to get to actually this year. So in 2025. So as we kind of continue on, right, United Health is actually estimating that their breach, which is reflected as Change Healthcare on this spreadsheet, will run between 2.3 to 2.5 billion with a B. Right. And there's a lot of speculation of what happened to this one. As a consumer, make it a habit to go onto the site to see whether or not your healthcare provider or your insurance company happens to be on here, and start making some intelligent questions about maybe opting your name and number and your contact out of their, let's say, marketing efforts, because that might be in a downstream service at a downstream service provider that they're not really managing themselves. So there's a lot of speculation what happened. I'm going to let Mike kind of handle more of this, of the description of the technical reasons of what happened, and then I'll come back around to me. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Karina. That's definitely a good example of the type of stuff we're talking about with cyber GRC, affecting like 3/4 of the country, which is crazy. And it's always interesting to me when you see a number like it just says 500, right? You know, that's the minimum for reporting. But in my head, we talked about this earlier, I was thinking, are they saying that because they're withholding the information, or did they just not really know? It's one of those things that's up to the attorneys, probably doing what's best for the business in many cases. Not too sure, but from looking into this over the past recent months, this kicked off in February of 2024, when everything hit the fan, and there was a well-known hacking group that did this. And from everything I've seen, it sounds like they did very standard stuff, right? So what I'm hearing is that a remote access server that's used for things like desktop updates was the source of entry for the threat actor. And what happened? It didn't have multi-factor authentication, right? So like when I'm making my daily posts, and some people might think, oh, this is boring, saying use 2FA. Well, it's legit. I mean, using two-factor authentication alone can stop about 85 to 90% of all issues, largely related to phishing. So what they did was they stole credentials somehow. That I don't know exactly how they got those credentials in February. And because there was no two-factor authentication, they were able to log into the remote access server. And then they started doing analysis, seeking lateral movement. Because when the threat actor gets in the system, you always want to get more access. You don't want to just stick with the access you have, right? You want to try to remove from the remote server to the internal databases and things like that, and get to where the valuable data is. And as we can see by the scope of this incident, they clearly were successful in that. So what they did was they exfiltrated 4 terabytes of data, which we now know equated to roughly 100 million records, probably of patients, maybe partners, suppliers, who knows. So they had that. And then after they had that data, they also did a ransomware attack. So you can see it's a multi-phased attack. So they locked out the systems using the ransomware. They contacted the company and they said, we want $22 million. I don't know if that was their original number or that's just what they settled on. Because a lot of times ransomware, it's a back and forth, right? Like you don't have to just send the amount of money they're asking for. You could say, we'll give you half. We'll give you $50,000, and sometimes it can go down. But whatever the case, Change Healthcare did send them $22 million. So this incident affected systems for about a week. So it impacted the hospitals, the medical centers, which could have life or death consequences in this case, which is disgusting to see, but it happens. It also impacted the payroll systems, the payment processing systems, which are so important for medical billing. So hope that gives a pretty good summary, but in short, you just don't want to be on this sort of list, right? HIPAA's in place to stop this sort of thing. Is it going to stop everything? No, but it's going to stop a lot of things if you do it right, do everything that it recommends you do. And then just to give a little bit of insight into how NIST recommends you set up your incident response plan, which is how you deal with this sort of thing. First, you want to prepare, right? You want to do as much of the work for figuring out how you're going to handle this sort of thing before something happens, so that way you have it. And then you move on to detection and analysis. So detecting is figuring out what's going on. Analysis is figuring out how it happened, how far it spread, things of that nature. And then you have containment, eradication, and recovery, which containment is making sure it doesn't spread further than it already is. Eradication, getting rid of the issue. And then recovery is getting back to how you were. And then after that, you have the post-incident activity, which is a lessons learned, right? Because you don't want to put this incident behind you and then have another one that's pretty much the same a month later. Although these incidents are terrible, you can use them as an opportunity for improvement. You do that by having lessons learned and making everything actionable that happened. Karina, what do you think about that?
I have so many opinions. Great summary. That's why we're here. So I am going to talk about some very basic GRC principles, right, that are very, very useful to us. And I want to implore everyone to move away from checkbox compliance. We're spending a lot of time checking those checkboxes that show up on those lists that are 7, 12, 10, 14 rows long that are written to be nebulous and vague by design because they need to be broadly applicable, right? And we have to take that and appropriate those controls to our specific operations. They're written, these frameworks are written for you to actually appropriate the controls for your specific operations. They're used as a guideline. Right now, there are laws you have to abide by. Those are regulations. But the frameworks really are there just to kind of help us in our operations. So one of the things that I would implore everyone to start with for 2025 is data classification. One of the most important things really when you come into a company, when Clever Compliance comes into a company and we say, where's your data? And they say, come back in 6 months. Because what we find is they're encrypting publicly available data. What a waste of money, right? We have become absolute data hoarders. Mm-hmm. We don't need, so there's purposefulness and minimization clauses and a lot of, high trust is one that says data purposefulness and minimization. Make sure that you're keeping the data that's relevant to your actual business. Right. So if we talk about, so I'm going to tag on to Mike's NIST V2, right? Data storage, data processing, and data transportation. Find out where your data is and whether it goes to vendors. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Access controls, logical, physical access controls, system to system access controls, very important. We've got APIs right now that we set up years and years and years ago. Those APIs are still sending data we're not getting error messages, but the receiving end isn't picking up, or they've changed something and there was a disconnect with how you configured that API and it was never updated. One of the biggest risks we have right now in our environment, right? Data retention. How long are you keeping that data? Publicly available information, dump it in 2 weeks. Get rid of it. You're increasing your data set and it's making you a more enticing target for somebody that wants to hack into you, because the hacker, it's going to take them 5 minutes to get into a big data set or a little data set. They're going to spend their time on the big data set because it's the same 5 minutes for them, right? Focus for an incident. Again, we're talking about recoverability. If 10 servers go down, which one's my most important to bring back up first? Have I identified which data set is directly aligned to my line of business, right? So we didn't do proper BIAs, or not we, CrowdStrike didn't do proper BIAs when they brought the company's the world's transportation systems down, because they didn't do a BIA that pushed some code out that shouldn't have been there. Change management fail.
Business impact analysis, right?
BIA, yep. When are you backing up your data and how often? And then destruction practices. Very, very important, right? I have examples of articles that say, well, you know, our third party went and dumped all of these laptops into the bin behind our building. Honest to goodness. Wow. And there was confidential information on there that was very easily recoverable. So these basic data classification principles really touch incident management, access management, asset management, vulnerability management. What are you protecting the most important? Patch management. Which patch do you prioritize, right? It shouldn't be on a calendar. It should be based on where's my most important golden egg data. Change management, procurement, vendor management, problem management, even outside of IT. GRC touches other departments outside of IT, HR, finance, legal, procurement, right? All of these things actually touch GRC and need to be measured that way. So really quickly, I'm going to share an article. I want to hop in really quickly into vendor management for a minute, because it's just such a critical fail on a lot of our, in a lot of our companies. So there is I want to highlight and give a huge applause to an article less than a month old. Hats off, right? Hats off, folks. MUFG decided, so this was written October 18th. And MUFG basically said, we're not going to do business with you until you tell us who your subservice organizations are. Where are you sending my data downstream once I give it to you? As part of our normal operations, very many companies have other vendors they work with, right? And it's part of just our normal protocols to forward data over to our vendors. The piece we're not asking is, where is it going from there? Right? So if you look at this, then you can find this article on risk.net. Hats off for this big decision. I wish that everyone would make a decision like this as far as their vendor management program is concerned. So let's talk about that a little bit more, right? So if you take the V2 principles on NIST, where are you putting my data for storage? How are you transporting it, and how are you processing it? And you move downstream into your vendor environments. SOC 2s don't exclude subservice organizations. Right? Just as part of normal protocol, there's very few SOC 2s that I've read that said, we audited this firm or this company and their vendors, it's out of scope, right? And it would be almost ridiculous to ask for that scope to be expanded to that level. So if you very specific things you want to check for in your vendor management program. So first, I think for 2025, if you haven't set one up, please set one up. Categorize your vendors. Are they super high risk? Are they one of those vendors like an AWS or Azure that will never answer your questionnaire? That's a risk acceptance. Maybe they have zero risk and they don't even get a questionnaire. Usually most clients will say, I want 2 questionnaires. I want one that's a little lengthier for the companies that do have my data that is important to me, financial data, employee data, customer data. And then maybe I'll have a lightweight questionnaire for just something a little smaller, right? So things to look out for. Tier your vendors, number 1. Figure out which questionnaire they're getting, if they're getting one. Make sure contractually it's very explicit what the breach notification requirements are. There are a lot of failure points in the process of onboarding a vendor where a lot of times they say you've agreed to our terms of service, and the term of service has very long legal mumbo jumbo that doesn't really say anything or provide any kind of a commitment as to when you're going to be notified of a breach. Ask who on their side has admin access to your data and why. There's a huge long story about that one. Ask if they are sending your data to their downstream vendors. Look, if they're storing data for you, they're looking at price too, right? If it's important for you to have your data be in the US as an example, make sure that that's specifically detailed in the contract, because you know what? They might be sending it somewhere overseas, which is much cheaper data storage. Because remember, we love to data hoard now. And unless you make it clear that you want it in the US and start looking at the data you're sending them, it's going to be a free-for-all on who is the cheapest storage provider on their side. Backup and purging needs to be extremely clear. I've read singular contracts where in one section it says, if you ever leave us and if you want data, your data, we're going to charge you for it. And in a different section, same contract, it'll say, we give you 30 days worth of data, but you can't ask for any more.
Wow.
Little different, right? Especially if my contract with you is 36 months. Again,
Right.
and then cyber insurance. So let me really quickly talk about cyber insurance. Mike, I'll hand it over to you. Sorry, I've been chatting too long.
Oh, it's all good.
So cyber insurance, I've unfortunately been seeing a lot of claims denied. I'm just going to say it, right? Because insurance companies are also trying to make money, right? And their losses many times due to breaches are catastrophic. Many companies just shut their doors because of a breach. Unfortunately, smaller companies. So internal security awareness is very, very key, but making sure you're answering those questionnaires very honestly is important. If you need help, Mike and I are available for that as well. We have resources available to help with that. But make sure that you're scoping your environment correctly and you have all of your important data identified.
You made a lot of good points there, and we're practitioners of GRC cyber, but to tie it back to what the business leaders might be thinking. So, the example you gave, Mitsubishi, they're kind of strong-armed. They're like, you're going to tell us all your vendors' names, and we like that. But some business leaders might not like that because they might want to keep their sources private, right? They might not want to say that they have this awesome factory in Taiwan or China somewhere that's making it for 3 cents each when everyone else out there is paying $20. So the reasons things happen and the reasons things don't happen often tie back to business. It often ties back to money. And although that's not purely in our scope, it benefits people like us so much to just account for that, because it becomes easier to get buy-in to cybersecurity and compliance if we can tie it back for them and just know the types of things that these executives are thinking about, right? Because the same way to get a yes out of a CEO might not be the same thing that gets a yes out of a COO or a CTO or a CIO, for example. So that pays a lot. And then it was extremely valuable when you brought up the data classification, right? Because when you're figuring out what your business has to comply with, there's some confusion about that. Some businesses might think, oh, well, what does a Los Angeles-based business need to comply with? Or what does a fintech business need to comply with? But if you think about the data classification, the types of data that you have, that gets you your answer, right? So the way I quickly help clients do this is to say, what types of data do you have? You have PII? Do you have payment card data? Okay, we got your data types figured out. Where do you operate around the world? Okay, you have locations in these 10 states. You have Brazil. You have Germany. Okay, well then now we know you need to comply with all of these laws, regulations, and guidelines. And then it becomes so much easier to comply with it once you know what you have to comply with. And it's also good to look for exceptions, right? Because I've had some clients, they're freaking out about the CCPA, and it may not even apply to them because they only have like 3 users in California. You know, that a lot of times there's a minimum amount of revenue, amount of users, or in the case of CCPA, it'll also apply if you make 50% of your revenue from California residents. So if you don't have to comply with something because you get an exception, that's a great quick way to comply with it. Just become exempt to it. Boom, you're done. Save the time.
Well, acknowledge that you've done the work and actually researching to make sure whether or not you have to abide by it. But yeah, I mean, absolutely right.
Yeah, and then to get back to where we were, you just had so much good information there. Just wanted to comment on those things. So what you can do, the first thing you want to do after data classification is to get a true understanding of what you have, right? And that includes having a network diagram, which shows how your systems are connected.
So important.
And then along with a network diagram, maybe you can combine it into one, but you want to have a data flow diagram to show how the data gets into your system, how it moves through your system, how it's stored in your system, you could even have on there, and then how it leaves the system, right? Because we're great at collecting the data, not as good as getting rid of the data, as you alluded to earlier and in prior sessions. And then with that, you want to have a hardware and software inventory, so you know everything that you have to consider, right? That way, if something goes wrong, you're not having to scramble saying, what systems do we have? You know, what software do we have? You know, because it's hard to figure out what caused a problem if you don't even know what software you have, right?
Yeah.
So then you have a good understanding of yourself, and then you also, when you're selecting controls, whether it's administrative, physical, or technical, you want to take the business into account, right? You can't just throw 1,000 controls at the business and say, you do these 1,000 things and we don't care if it slows you down. We don't care if it takes you 3 hours to send an email. You got to really take the business, your business, or any organization into account when selecting those controls. And it's not black and white, right? You as the cybersecurity leader or compliance leader, you can't just send it to the IT team and say, do these 1,000 things. Very often it's a back and forth, right? Because even if you and your team took the business into account, the others might disagree. The IT team might say, no, these 20% right here, we don't think we should do this. Or the executives might say that. They might say it's too expensive, or they might say it's slowing us down too much. So it is a back and forth, right? There's no one size fits all to this stuff. So you got to know how to relate to these other departments and get that buy-in, work on it together to make sure your efforts are properly aligned with the business, so you get more yeses than nos. And then when you're selecting the controls, you want to make sure you're protecting both your perimeter, which is at like the network level traditionally. I mean, some startups may not have a pure network; they might be just relying on different pieces of software and cloud presences. So in addition to your perimeter, you also want to have the interior of your system protected. At minimum, that's at the host level, whether it's your laptops, desktops, servers, routers, and things like that. And then you want to have the logical safeguards in place, right? So things like VLANs, network segmentation, access control lists. And you want to set it up in a way where you're leveraging the existing tools that you're provided with, right? Like a lot of times we see clients, they have Microsoft 365, like an accounting firm, for example, and there's a million settings in there, but they'll still be talking to me about, hey, do you think we should buy this tool here?
Oh my God, yes.
Right?
Oh my God, yes. Like people aren't turning on DLP.
Yeah.
You know what? Look, so just because you have 100 different tools doesn't mean you're more secure. Because
Exactly.
a lot of them come out, a lot of them actually display to you source data from the same exact spot. Right. So the other thing is the tool isn't going to do everything for you. You can, so turning on a log. Okay. Data classification. What are you logging? Right. I mean, there are alerts that I've seen be generated by DLPs. Nobody's there to receive the alert. No one is there to work the alert. And the alerts could say things like, your staff members are passing social security numbers, credit card numbers, just flinging them all over the place, left and right, right? You haven't put that person on an approved sender or receiver list. You're not encrypting that data as it's transferring, but nobody's there to look at the logs. So it's not about having more tools. It's not about having more controls. It feels like with 75% of the US population having been involved in a healthcare breach, we have way more tools and controls than we ever have. But that breach amount keeps increasing. So what's happening, right? Like why is it we have more and more tools, but we're really not any more secure because we're literally thinking that checkbox compliance exercise is going to get us more secure, and it won't.
No.
It's not about that, right? Go ahead.
Yeah. No, going into that, you're right. It's like, well, first off, when you have more tools, sometimes they can collide with each other, right? You don't want to say, oh, we're evaluating between these 3 endpoint detection tools. Oh, let's just use all 3 of them, even better, right? One,
No.
3 is better than 1. They can really interfere with each other, give them false readings. But then it goes into another thing we've talked about in the past, the burnout, right? Because technical teams and users can have burnout. You've given some good examples of that when we talked.
Well, I mean, I go into companies and I see, I kind of cruise the support organization, and here's folks that show up to work and they have 1 tool, 2 tool, 4 tool, tool number 7, tool number 9, and maybe tool number 11 is their incident management tool. And then on top of that, each one of these tools goes and sends them an email. So look, we're breeding ADHD in this scenario, right? We are literally, how does anyone survive? How can you at all keep up with any level of managing what's a priority? And then on top of that, we haven't even identified what's the most important data. What's the most important type of ticket? So you have to put in very, very concerted efforts into creating a single source of truth, one spot where your workers are measured on, where they work out of. Please turn off the email, because there's a version control issue most of the time in email. Somebody else picks up the ticket, maybe in a different location on a different floor, maybe even 2 QBs away from you, whatever it is. But it makes it very, very hard to actually work those tickets and try to know what all of these alerts are and all of these systems are. Your checklist for your single source of truth internally, all of your alerts, all of your thresholds, all of your scans that you're running with your internal systems. Whenever you can, if there's a repeatable ticket type, put in a KBA into that ticket as a default that tells the technician how to fix that ticket. It's doable. Yeah. Do it for as many of the scenarios as you can. External scans, patches, vendors updating their system. How do you know about that? Vendor has an alert. Vendor system goes down and you receive an alert. Have that KBA. Here's my phone number. Here's my contract number. Here's who I talked to. Here's when that warranty is expiring. So the technician making the call and tracking that down has all the information they need to be extremely successful on the spot. When end users submit tickets, there's two types of tickets. I need something and something's broken. If it's an I need something based on ITIL principles, that's called a request. If something's broken, that's called an incident. Do not mix the two.
True.
It's coming up in the future.
It happens.
Don't spend the time on it, right? Yeah.
It does.
Yeah. So approvals, provisioning, right? All of the other competency areas, your change management, these all need to be centrally located, or else this cybersecurity burnout that all of us are talking about, we can't find people. Well, for God's sakes, what are we asking them to do? It's not all an AI answer, right? It's literally, it does require some thought, some familiarity with our environments, and some training, and making it so that our folks can be successful when they come into work in the morning.
Yeah. And there are some ways to counter that cybersecurity burnout for the staff. And I try to keep things as common sense as possible. Most of us do, but when you're in the nitty gritty of it, sometimes you forget to. But in that case, what are the possible solutions, right? So if you have a team in place to look at the issues, at the logs, at the notifications, but they don't know what to do or which ones are important, maybe they need more training. Or maybe you need a bit more automation involved, so that way, whether it's AI or not, maybe it can help you sort through these things because your staff can't keep up with it. Or maybe you already have a pretty good process in place and you just need to lower the threshold, right? Like if you're getting 10,000 alerts a day and you can't realistically look through more than 1,000 a day because of the way your team is set up, just filter it out. Get a tool that can filter it down for you, so that way a lot of the false positives or just the negative, the non-factor log entries just go away, so that way you don't have to look at it.
So one of the things I want to add to that, and it's very important, we publicly traded companies have a requirement with the Securities Exchange Commission to do a 4-day notification to them for business day notification in case of a material breach, right? So this happened at the beginning of last year. And a lot of people have talked about it. It's kind of a dying topic because it's not most recent, but there are companies who struggle with this. And here's the use case that happens. I implore you to put this into your tabletop exercises, especially if you're publicly traded, because you don't want to figure this out if the situation is happening. Trust me, right? What you're going to drill is you're going to drill an emergency situation. You're going to drill an event happening, and you're going to start at entry point at your incident desk. And something's occurred, and now you're going to follow that event all the way through to the person who would, in theory, do a signature on filing that 8K or 10K for your company, notifying the Securities Exchange Commission that there's been a breach. Here's what's happening today. Well, you drop something into legal and it's 45 days later, right? Or you drop something into the finance group and it's 30 days later. They don't know that it's important. You haven't drilled it with them. Right? They might be far away. They might be in a panic. What a great opportunity for deep fakes, right? I mean, because if you're experiencing a breach or an incident, oh, hello. So what's happening is a lot of these folks sitting at the technician desk who receive these incidents know full well that their legal department can't turn around anything that quickly. So what do? They pick up the phone. Hello, SEC.
Yeah.
Right. And they are protected by whistleblower laws. They are self-reporting incidents that are happening to the Securities Exchange Commission because they know their company will never turn around a proper notification to the Securities Exchange Commission within 4 days. Please drill it. I really, really implore everyone to drill this use case and know that they'd be able to handle this scenario. And Lord willing, you never use it. You just drill it.
Mhm.
And great. We made some new friends in other departments, and now everybody knows that, purple dinosaurs are secret code word for it's an emergency, right?
Yeah.
Make sure to have your internal communication in place, external communication in place, and your entire workflow logged correctly and drilled through.
I see a comment here. No, great points. Can you define KBA real quick?
KPA.
KPA.
KBA. Oh, I'm sorry. Knowledge base articles. Thank you, Brianna.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is actually a some people call them wikis.
Yeah.
Some people just whatever is a kind of a short, quick way to do a document of knowledge base article.
Yeah. No, thanks for defining that. You make some really good points here. So you may not be at a publicly traded company, or maybe you are, but at minimum, you have to know as part of your incident response plan who you need to notify, right? So if you're not a publicly traded company, there's some other. If you support a publicly traded company, you might apply, but that's another story. But to talk about that for a second, the SEC cybersecurity rules, it's related to breach disclosure, and it's kind of sloppy because they leave it up to the company to define if it's meaningful to them, like it's going to affect their reporting, like their earnings or anything like that. But a company could just say, no, we don't think it's meaningful, so that's why we didn't report it. So if you're the SEC, that's the sort of thing. Maybe it could use a little bit more structure. But at minimum, you just got to know who you got to call, right? Like mostly every state has a requirement that if a certain number of people in their state are impacted by a data breach at your company, you have to notify the Attorney General's office. I know that's the case here in Nevada. I think the number is like 500. Might be some other states, but just know who to call, right? And it's so much easier if you build your incident response plan before something happens, right? You don't want to be dealing with chaos and you're having to Google, oh, what does the state of Colorado want me to do? I don't know. If you just take the time proactively beforehand, you can figure this stuff out pretty quickly, or someone like us can help a company sort through that sort of thing. Just know who to call.
I think the important thing in crisis management, 1-800 numbers, right, is very important. But I think we have to also very carefully look at perception, and understand that a lot of folks in the IT support field are incredibly ethical people who want to do the right thing and who also believe that they're firefighters that save the company over and over and over again. And many times it's absolutely true. So there's no way many times to prevent insiders from making those notifications out of your company. You may never know that happens, right? So make sure that you are giving them comfort in notifying them and having them participate in building this plan out for the company and making sure that they have instructions, because in a time of panic, people do knee-jerk things, right? They just have reactions where if they just read an article that says you have to report to the SEC, well, they're calling the SEC because they think that's the right thing to do, right? So your messaging internally and externally needs to be very important.
Yeah, exactly. Because that 96-hour requirement for the SEC, it doesn't start until you make the determination that it's a meaningful event to you. So even if it did take you 45 days to figure that out, maybe you sent some information over to legal and they didn't get back to you for a month, you're not necessarily past that 96 hours because you haven't determined it's meaningful to you yet. So when you have an incident go on, you mentioned it briefly, but cyber insurance, right? It's kind of a complicated issue. It's like who needs it, who doesn't need it. Do you have a good rule of thumb for how much coverage to get or how much it's going to cost you for something like that? Like What do you think about that?
So here's my thought of cyber insurance, and I'm unfortunately seeing a lot of very denied claims, declined claims, right? So, buying cyber insurance. So let me talk about the logistics behind that. Hello, agent. Okay, fill out this questionnaire. I'm going to take it. I'm an executive. I'm going to pass it over to my IT people.
Yeah.
The IT people are given instructions. Fill this out. Make sure it's all filled out. Make sure all the answers say yes. Checkbox compliance.
Yeah.
They're going to figure out a way how the hell to say yes for everything. Get sent back to the insurance company. Insurance company, based on the information they're given, will give you a quote. There's a few failure points on that.
Yeah.
Because the person filling out the questionnaire did not look at GRC holistically and was given instructions to definitely do this. They're thinking that they're going to be good. Companies think that they're good if they have cyber insurance. They think that they don't have to stand up a comprehensive governance program because they have cyber insurance. They think that cyber insurance is just going to cover them. But when push comes to shove, very recent example, unfortunately extremely recent, MFA being implemented on a very small sliver of the environment. Did you tell me this, Mike, or was this someone else?
Might have been someone. I think so.
So very small sliver of the overall environment had MFA. Questionnaire and cyber insurance said, do you have MFA? Person answering it, sure we do. Said yes, because their instructions are make sure you fill everything out and you say yes to everything, right?
Oh, yeah.
So now a breach occurs, but it didn't occur via the one part of the environment that had MFA. It occurred somewhere else. Losses, hundreds of millions. Insurance claim denied.
Yeah. Yeah, it's disgusting.
So don't think that your insurance policy that you pay a lot of money for is going to compensate you for any losses, and you're going to, boom, come right back to where you were operationally because you have insurance. Isn't going to happen, folks.
Yeah, you're right about that. And I found that out the hard way. You know, as a business leader in our type of company, you try different strategies. One of the ones I tried years back was contacting these companies and the agents that offer cyber insurance and saying, why don't we link up? You know, you could offer, if someone doesn't really know where they stand with their cybersecurity, you can have my company come in and help. And I've heard of some of them wanting that, almost very rarely, but the ones I dealt with, they seemed like they wanted to puke. And after enough time, what I gathered, and one of them told me, is that the cyber insurance companies are incentivized for you to just send a checklist and it to be wrong, right? So that way they can reject it for a reason like you said. Like, so far anyway, I mean, it's kind of new for a lot of companies. It seems more strict than like your car insurance, right? Like if you tell Allstate that you drive 3,000 miles a year, if you have to get a lower rate, if you have a wreck, I've never heard them checking to see if you drove more than 3,000 miles a year. But some things in this area, just be truthful when you're filling out those the questionnaire, whatever they send you. And even if you are trying to be truthful, if you're not sure if the answer is right, have someone help you that can give you the assurance that it's correct, whether it's your internal team or someone in our field. Just because you just have to make sure it's truthful and accurate, so you can have true assurance that it's gonna pay out if something goes wrong. And then you also want to figure out how much coverage to get, right? So that goes back to having an understanding of how different types of cyber incidents would harm you, right? Like if you determine at your business, for example, say you have $1 million of revenue per year, and you determine that a 1 week cyber incident could cost you, for whatever reason, 30% of your annual revenue, then it seems like you're a great candidate for needing cyber insurance. Whereas if you have way more cash flow than you would ever need, and you think you can handle any cyber incident that you're likely to have out of pocket, then there's a good chance you don't need cyber insurance. Maybe you'd want it, but maybe not. So it does vary per company. And it's important to ask these types of questions So you get the right policy with the right amount of coverage, and you can have assurance that it'll pay out if something goes wrong.
That's super important. I want to talk about appropriating controls again really quickly. I want to kind of loop this down. As you're developing your compliance program and you use those checklists as guidance and those thousands and thousands and thousands of row checklists, try to make it appropriated to you. So think of examples like if you have 12 things on your recipe for tonight's dinner and you go to the grocery store and you buy one of every single thing at the store and haul it home just to get your 12 things. It's absurd, but it's what we're doing. Don't let this overwhelm yourself. If one of those rows say you have to have car insurance, but you live in New York and you don't even have a car because you use the subway, it doesn't apply to you. And that's okay, because you're not going to take that thing that says you must have car insurance and go get car insurance just because it says it on the list if you don't have a car. But a lot of us try to do this in our environment when we're setting up these compliance programs. And so that is going to be reflective of that questionnaire that the cyber insurance company is going to send you, right? What you're looking for are solid controls. Insurance really needs to be a backup, an emergency backup. It is not in lieu of a solid GRC program that protects your perimeters, protects your interior. You know where your data is, you know where your assets are, and you have a full program, and all the other departments are involved. HR is involved, legal's involved, finance is involved, all of the other departments are involved. We have another section on build versus buy that Mike's going to be leading. Let's close off with that. We're getting close.
Yeah. So build versus buy, right? That generally means, are you going to do something yourself, or are you going to pay someone else to do it? If you have a lawn, you may be able to cut the lawn yourself, but if it's not worth your time because you're not good at it, or you have a million other things to do, probably worth hiring someone else to do that. So in our area, it's important to do this build versus buy determination, and either can be correct. The only thing that's not correct is nobody doing it for you, right? So when might you build your own program? Well, if compliance is a big part of what you do every day, and you feel like you'd be paying a consultant firm too much money to do it for you, or you feel that it's just not worth your time, you might send it outwards. Whereas if you need to have it internally because it's a core competency, it pays to have it internally. But it's important to be realistic when you're thinking about this sort of thing, right? You can't just say, oh, we've got these 3 engineers, they're great, they can handle this sort of thing. Well, for one, do they have the proper cybersecurity and compliance background? Do they have the time to do it, right? Because it goes back to the thinking with the pizza, right? You can take a pizza and cut it into 8 pieces or 16 pieces, but if you have your engineers that should be doing coding, doing the things like we do instead, they're having less time to do other stuff, and that's going to lead to shortcuts. So those are the sort of things to consider. And then it also goes into the conversation of when you're building out your network, right? Is it worth having your own servers and routers at a building somewhere, or is it just worth going with AWS or Azure or Google Cloud like a lot of startups do? The answer really varies. For years we were seeing a lot of companies going to the cloud. I've been hearing a lot of examples of companies leaving the cloud, and they realize it's worth having it in their building or wherever, and just managing their own cloud themselves. So that's important to figure out. Do you have anything to add to build versus buy before we move on to dashboards and management reporting?
Yeah, I think that we should consider as organizations some of the basics, right? So vendor management. If you don't have anyone to set up a vendor management program for you, that might be a great opportunity to call a consultant. Risk management, right? If we're talking about a SOC or managed security, if you are not big enough to have your own help desk, you need to make sure to track things. So that might be, even like a privacy management program. Let's say you have consumer privacy data. There's over 120 countries right now, and I believe we're up to 7 states in the US where you can actually enact consumer privacy rights, right? You need to know how to receive and handle and fulfill those requests. When a consumer says to you, get me off of your lists, right? And unless you have, and it's not tool based always, you guys, a lot of tools out there, you know what they do? They give you a splash page, a form where the consumer puts in their name, they grab that data and dump it into your ticketing system, right? It's not as amazing and technologically advanced as you all think it is, right? Another thing, you can't hire a chief compliance officer. Have someone, even if they're fractional, right? Have somebody help you with gathering evidence passively, making sure you're aligning your controls that you do have up to those regulations and frameworks that you have to be abiding by, right? You're getting ready for an audit cycle. You're coming out of an audit cycle. You're getting ready to do cyber insurance information. Perfect opportunity. Call someone like Mike and I and say, hey, I need to do this insurance qualifier. Help me. And we can come in and look at that. Mm-hmm. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, those are great points. And there's a perception that hiring someone like us can cost a lot. And maybe if you hire someone for 300 hours a month or, 100, maybe it can get expensive. But even if you did have a couple of good engineers and you think they can handle it pretty well, you could still hire someone to look over their shoulder for an hour a month, right?
Right.
And then that way you're getting a higher degree of assurance. You're getting a third-party opinion that they're doing it right, because they may say they're doing it right. It's very easy to go to the CEO and say, oh, no, we don't have any issues because you didn't look and find the issue. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. It could easily be a combination.
Yeah.
Consultants are pretty flexible in a lot of times. But as technical people, as we talked about earlier, you've got to support the business leaders, the people at the boardroom table. If you have a formal board that meets, they need to know what's going on, even if that's just like looking at one slide or you giving a 30-second update. So it's one good way to do that is just to have a dashboard, right? So you can make the data visual and give those leaders assurance. And what should be on that dashboard, it really varies per organization, right? One leader may not care about the things that the other leaders know. The CEO may want to see a couple things that the chief information officer doesn't care about, but they might have some different things. So just work with them, figure out the things they care about, and report on it. Some common things are like recovery time objective, meaning how long can you tolerate being down before it becomes a problem? Is it 4 hours? Would 2 hours kill you? Would your users start canceling left and right if it were 2 hours? If so, then maybe you got to say, we can't tolerate being down more than 2 hours. And then you can put that on your dashboard so you can kind of report that to the CEO and the board. We've stayed within the agreed upon uptime requirements, so that's good to go. Some other things could be your risk score based on vulnerability scans or maybe pen tests. You could have your compliance status with different frameworks and just say, okay, we're meeting 98% of our contractual requirements. Mm-hmm. Or you could say we're meeting 20%. The CEO will say, why is it so terrible? Do something about it. And it doesn't have to be a deeply technical conversation. A lot of times they'll just say, make number go up, make number go down. And then you say, yes, I will do that. Next month, number be lower. And I make number lower.
Do they have that accent too? Maybe.
Yeah. And that sort of thing. And if you and your team are doing all the things we spoke about and keeping management in the loop, I think you'll be good to go. Do you have any closing statements for everyone on the call?
I think know where your data is and figure out how to protect it, and call if you need help, because no one is expecting everybody to know everything, and try to broaden your horizon about what you think of GRC.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a field that has continuing education requirements for a reason. It's because we have to keep learning. That's why certifications like CISSP have that. And I've learned from you today, and thank you for
And I
taking
learned.
to do this together. I see a recommendation, I think, for a future presentation. So to those of you on the call, thank you for attending. We are going to be asking for feedback and future topics you'd like to see, so that way we can do this again in the future. Without the 10 seconds of technical difficulty, there'll be hopefully 0 seconds of technical difficulty. And hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.